Thank you. Good morning. I always love working in the Midwest. I'm from the Midwest. Clearly, I was born and raised in the Detroit area. But here it is, 7 a.m., and this place was buzzing, because the Midwest, we get up and we make things happen. Also, I really want somebody to design devices for females when they're speaking. Fortunately, I was smart today and wore pockets. But in general, if you wear a dress, it's not a good story. So I think I've wasted enough time. Now my slides are up, so I'll get started. I really want to talk a lot about what's happening in the world of mobility. It's changing fast, very fast. Technology is eclipsing public policy, and engineers are developing new things every single day. I also want to talk a lot about smart cities. I know Vasu mentioned I was at Ohio State in between my stint at Nissan and here at the Center for Automotive Research. But while there, I led the Columbus Smart City Challenge for the university. And it really opened my eyes about, not just using cool technology, but using cool technology to solve problems in our communities. So I really want to focus on those two things. I hope you take a little bit of that away with you today. And mobility really is the economic engine for a city in so many ways. So mobility, we often talk about it as moving people from place to place, job to job, moving goods around. But really, it provides a way to improve your social status. It can provide educational opportunities. It also helps with being able to get you to medical appointments, etc., and to be able to have quality of life as you age. So we really need to think about how mobility can help bridge those gaps that exist today in our society. When we talk about smart mobility, and I do apologize anybody who listened to me speak last night, I do have a few slides that are duplicated, but not so many. So smart mobility, I call it the 000, which is 0 accidents and fatalities. We had 37,000 people killed on our roads in the last few years. That number has increased every year, except 2018, we saw a little decrease, hopefully due to some of the safety systems that have been put in place on vehicles. But 37,000 people, that's the equivalent of a 737 crashing every day. On a global level, that's 1.3 million people, which is about the equivalent of a 777 crashing every day. That's a lot of people, and with 94% of that being caused by human error, it really makes a lot of sense to try to remove that element. Secondly, 0 carbon footprint. Yes, electric vehicles are great. There's 0 emissions coming out of the tailpipe, but only if you're using clean energy to charge those products. If you're using coal-powered electricity, the amount of carbon emissions that is being emitted is worse than in a very efficient internal combustion engine. So it has to be a very holistic carbon footprint, including the energy used to make the parts going into that product and the energy that we use when we recycle it at end of life. And thirdly, and in my mind most importantly, it's 0 stress. 0 stress for the drivers, 0 stress for the occupants, and 0 stress for the vulnerable road users, our bicyclists, our pedestrians, people in wheelchairs, the blind. Everyone need to feel comfortable in this new multimodal environment. And then what is a smart city? It's using data and technology to really improve lives and improve the value of the city. We've seen a lot of cases, if you've gone to, let me just talk about New York City for a moment, where technology has been implemented in a city and it just becomes a monument of technology and nobody's using it. If you've been in the subway in New York City and you see in the stations there are kiosks, which are absolutely useless because by the time it wakes up, the train's already come and gone and you don't have any idea which way you were supposed to go. So really trying to focus technology on solving a problem rather than technology for technology's sake. And this is really hard for an engineer like me to get, because when we were trained in engineering, we thought up all kinds of great ideas. We have more ideas than you can shake a stick at. And we then look for a problem to apply that idea. It has to be exactly the opposite. You have to have people that understand the problem and then use technology to solve that problem. When we won the Columbus Smart City Challenge, we had just tons of companies. We became the best bride in the country. Everybody was coming and saying, we can solve this. We've got this great platform. We can do an integrated data system for all your modes of transportation and it will work. They didn't even ask us what problem we were trying to solve, what we really wanted to do. And this is what you need to make clear, and companies need to understand that. So we talk about multimodality, which is what we need to solve the congestion problem. And to be honest, I don't know how bad your congestion problem is in this region. But you have to change human behavior, which means personal vehicles and personal vehicle ownership needs to go away. The only way that's going to happen is if we're able to do that in a seamless way. When I use Uber and Lyft, if I call an Uber or Lyft, and I do it all the time in cities because I hate renting cars anymore. I also use public transit whenever I can. But if it's over 5 minutes, I'm like, gosh, darn it. 5 minutes. Now, if I got in my car, I was just in Vegas speaking earlier this week. If I had gotten in my car, it would have taken me 10, 12 minutes because I'd have sat in traffic on the strip probably. But you don't think about that. But in reality, people have a limit and a comfort zone. And for example, if you were going to work and you had to use an Uber, Lyft, or a shared service, and you only had a half hour for lunch and you had errands to run, yeah, it's problematic. So how can we fix that? What kind of solutions? And there are more and more coming all the time. And then if I really want to be multimodal, I need to have an integrated common payment system. So I don't have to have an account with Uber and Lyft and the public transit and the train and everywhere else and open all these apps and try to figure it out. I want one app where I want to go from A to B, and it's going to tell me, it's going to give me a menu, just like when you book a plane flight. Here's the fastest way. Here's our new flagship. Here's the healthiest way. Use your feet, ride a bike. And then you just need to have one way of paying for it, and the back room sorts out to pay everyone. These are the kind of enablers that will make a difference. Shared pickup and drop off of vehicles. We need to really turn urban planning upside down. Think about the value of curb space. Eliminate crazy policies about creating parking and more parking garages. They're not pretty. And all new buildings, think about how we can have a shared way. It looks like we're going to lose power, which is not good because I'll lose my brain. And then think about how public transit can be improved. For example, I was at a public transit agency event listening for a long time, and then I actually had to speak. And everyone was saying, we know about boats, trains, and buses. That's all we do. And now have I lost my voice too? Hello? Hello? I got my voice back, okay. And I said, no, you need to think differently. Because when you think about public transit today, what happens? Let's just talk buses. There's a fixed route, it has a fixed schedule, and regardless if there's one person on that bus or the bus is full, it does the same darn thing every day. We have a lot of data. There's a lot of data about ridership. And maybe it makes sense during certain parts of the day that you actually might partner with a mobility service provider and say, hey, Uber, hey, Lyft, run a small van. Because it doesn't make sense for me to have a big diesel emitting bus that's running the same schedule every day. We have the data, use the data, and think about how you can cooperate with TNCs and not feel that it's impinging or damaging to your business. I mentioned common payment systems. Only one thing I want to talk about here, the common payment system is critical, so you don't have to have an account, but in the US, there's about 25% of people that don't have a credit card and don't have a bank account. So you have to make sure you can still use good old green dollars in that common payment system. And also, you need to think about inclusive mobility. On the right-hand side of this slide is an app. There are wayfinding apps, and they work with people that have cognitive and physical disabilities. This kind of app was deployed in Barcelona, And with this kind of app, they were able to reduce dependence on paratransit and put people in public transit by 75%. 75%. And I was there and I walked with a lady who was in a home for people with disabilities. She was probably about 30, but probably had the mind of a 14-year-old, I'm guessing. And I walked with her and followed the app, and it was great. It showed pictures, it warned her if she was going off route, and at one point the people who developed the app said, well, go ahead and go off route. No, I can't do that. You know, it was just against what she normally did. But we need to think about really how we can enable people that don't have mobility or have recently lost mobility. It has to be an inclusive in the society. So there's different modes for different demands. This shows basically distance and flexibility, and of course the shorter distances, that's where you can use walking and biking more and micromodality. And up at the upper end, the long trips, more flexible is the car ownership. And there's everything in between, and finding those right solutions and enabling all of those solutions is very important. So there's lots of innovative mobility services, and they're cropping up all the time. Ride hailing is the old traditional taxis, ride sharing, car sharing, bike sharing, mobile methods, and we're going to start seeing a lot more of these. I understand you don't have scooters here yet, so you haven't experienced Scootergeddon. But let me tell you, it is shocking. I was at South by Southwest. I don't know if anybody was in Austin. I nearly got killed, I don't know how many times. I was walking down the sidewalk. I wasn't going to get on a scooter because I don't know how to use them. I'm a little bit scared of them. I have friends that have done it, and they said they scared themselves. So, you know, there's no training, but there were parts where the sidewalk was actually closed, and they had us in these little enclosed walkways. I'm walking, it's very narrow, and all these people are on your left, on your right. I felt like I was skiing, but, because normally I'm the slowest skier too, but it was really crazy, and I think we have to put some rules around it and think about how we want to integrate it. But we're going to see a lot more. You're going to see a lot more autonomous pods, one vehicle, one-person cars. We already see things like the Twizy and others in Europe. We're going to see a lot more of that as people seek different options. And then mobility as a service. Our new millennials only want to pay for what they use. And I hate to group all millennials together because I have 4 children, they're all millennials, and none of them are similar. But it's very true that many people today, with all of the demands and home mortgage prices plus educational debt, etc., buying a car is not top of mind. And shared automated vehicles, again, that sharing economy is going to be critical. And to do that, we have to think about how to incentivize that behavior. So I call your personal vehicle your personal vehicle security blanket. Why do you like it? You only drive it 5% of the time. It costs you about $745 a month when you add it all together, 5% of the time. But it's always there, and it always can take you where you need to go. So, but the only way we're going to make anybody feel comfortable to eliminate it is if you have a seamless way to get from A to B, plus all of your stuff to get from A to B. That's what everybody tells me. Oh, I've got so many things in my car. And I remember when I had the kids and they were younger, I had everything in my car. I had, you know, Cheerios, toys, you name it. It was in there because you never know what you're going to need. So there's a lot of business opportunities, though, for that kind of thing. What if you decided to do a mobility sharing service and all that stuff, you just have a list of that stuff. It's automatically in the product when it comes to get you and your family, whatever. So we have to think about the new businesses that can be generated to enable people to do things differently. I already mentioned about public transit. I've got a lot on electric vehicles, so I'm going to talk about that later. So this slide basically says personal vehicles aren't used 95% of the time. One of the biggest problems in big cities is the circling about even to find parking, because smart parking doesn't exist in a lot of cities. So we don't know how many spaces there are, and you have to just circle around, and that creates a lot more congestion. So if you can have vehicles that can drop you off and go park themselves in some remote area, because we don't want them parking in the city, in the walkable area, it's much better. And really thinking about how to reuse some of that parking space, how to create those green cities, how to make a city for the reason cities were initially developed. Cities came about so that people could be together, could talk about the issues, could enjoy the day, could go to the park, could go to the playground, not to drive vehicles around. This is where shared mobility currently is in the US, and I don't think it's any big surprise. I'll see if this laser pointer will work, because as an engineer, we love our laser pointers. Okay, I'm happy. You can see it's mainly in the very urban, dense areas. And most people, quite frankly, who are using these services today are usually well-educated and fairly high income. So they have many options. This isn't the best way. We really need to democratize rides and make it equal access for all. And there are a lot of people working on that through data and data monetization, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But there's 600 plus cities with ride sourcing, pooled rides, card sharing, and bike share is becoming much more popular and highly utilized. So this is kind of interesting. This is adoption of ride share. And pretty much, we still have about 70% of the population or more that know rideshare exists, but they have never used it. Or they know friends have used it, but they have not. Because we have a significant amount of our population where it just doesn't exist in many areas. And then looking at the numbers here, you can see the greatest majority are probably like me, using it 2 to 3 times a month or even more infrequently than that when traveling, when going out and they're drinking and they don't want to drive home. That's mostly the norm. Daily usage is about 6%. We're going to watch that figure. As cities become more congested and more dense with the new urban planning, a lot of cities are looking at a growth rate of over 100% in the next 5 years. Many cities are looking at becoming mega cities globally. China has some that are 70 million people or more. 70 million. You cannot possibly have vehicles for all those people. And we're going to see more and more densification of our urban areas. And we need to learn from these other communities globally that are doing this work and what's working and the successes that they have. So when we look at transportation network companies, and I'm gone again, but I'm certain it's a great slide. Is it good or bad? I think it's great because, again, we want to have all those different options. And what we have seen is a decrease in taxis. Anybody who's ever ridden a lot of taxis, that doesn't break your heart. But it is an issue for the taxi companies, it's true. But what we've seen is transportation network companies are going up. What we're also seeing is it's increasing vehicle miles traveled, and all those people need to own a car. So vehicle ownership is not decreasing. We're actually causing more problem. And I keep talking about New York, but I'll talk about it again. It is a disaster right now. If you've been there, it is just a huge traffic jam bottleneck. On top of all the Ubers, Lyfts, plus taxis, there are all kinds of delivery vehicles because e-commerce isn't going to stop anytime soon. Nobody goes to the store anymore. And I'll say millennials again, they get everything delivered, and even old folks like me, I love Amazon. So that's not going to get better. And we're going to have to go to the sky to fix this. Go to the sky with drones and also robotic delivery devices. But we have to really think about what are the policies that we need to put in place to stop this kind of congestion. Is it a carrot or stick mentality? Should we only allow TNCs to have EVs? There's a number of things we can think about to mitigate some of the things that we're seeing happening. So this is some projections. There's some big numbers here. From 2015 to 2030, we're going to expect to see total vehicle miles traveled roughly go from 3 to 5 million. I'm sorry, trillion. Big number. We have about 4% shared in 2015. That number is going up. Not great. It's kind of on an asymptotic slope right now. It hasn't reached the exponential kick. But to about 25% in 2030. And most people, you begin to see the hockey stick go up about after that time, when behavior really changes. Car sharing programs continue to increase, although not so much. You know, these are the car-to-go, those kinds of programs, Zipcar, and more are coming into the marketplace. Why? They're expensive, they're only useful for certain things, and they're not so easy to use. Sometimes you have to go find one. And again, if it's not at my front door, a lot of people won't use it. So we're seeing it grow, but not at the level that we thought. We are seeing mobility services grow more. Look what's happening in all these areas. And some of these companies, I don't even know. You know, I keep mentioning Lyft and Uber, but there's Via, there's RideCell, there's a number of other companies that have been started, and many of these are being bought by the automakers. Why? The automakers see a problem. And automakers are good at one thing: designing, manufacturing, and selling cars to dealers. We do that really great. We don't do mobility as a service at all. And customer experience is not our forte. So we need to work with those who get it, who understand how to use data, and then we can have this full multimodal situation. Because at the end of the day, we're going to be selling mobility packages to people. And we need to work with people who know how to do this. So what do cities need to think about when we go into the world of autonomy? Think about your infrastructure. Think about the communication, starting with connectivity, connection to traffic signals, smart street lamps, making sure that if it's DSRC, if it's 4G, if it's 5G, if it's cellular, that all that exists, so that at least in the very beginning, cars can begin to communicate and become more efficient. It can tell you fundamentally how long it's going to take for the light to change, etc. Think about how to communicate with the vulnerable road users and or how they should be communicating. There are companies now, Nissan being one, that yes, you can see, a car can see, yes, the person is crossing the street or they're not. With LiDAR technology, they can see it's a person and they're doing something. However, you as a driver are much more interpretive than that. You can tell if that person's going to go even though they don't have a white crosswalk. You can also think about if a ball comes in front of a car, probably a kid is coming behind that ball. A car can't think that way, but a car can be trained to think that way. So they are actually trying to develop algorithms so cars can understand body language. And that will help a lot for the vulnerable road users. Again, it's all machine learning. It's all artificial intelligence, but it's coming. But in the meantime, we need to think about how we can make the community more visible to understand and communicate what the people on the roadways are doing. Clear lane markings are a good idea, but not mandatory. It's a little bit scary to hear me say that, but if you have good GPS or GNSS data, Global Positioning System or Global Navigation Satellite System in the area, the vehicles can use that. The lane markings are kind of a double check, so to speak, and you always want to have these redundancies. So it's good, and I really want the automakers to get together and figure out and say, this is what we need for signage, this is what we need for road markings. But if we expect companies that have been competitors their whole life to do that, I think I'm going to grow old very quickly. It's just not that kind of environment, although recently the big three did get together and decide they're going to work with SAE to create standards. What does it mean for landform? We don't know yet. You know, I'm an advocate of the densification We can clear up a lot more urban core space. We can redevelop neighborhoods the way we want them. More walkable areas, places for families to do things. However, there are some people, and I had a professor at Ohio State that always told me I was wrong. He said, but Carla, you know, come on, if people don't have to drive their car, they don't mind sitting in a car for a longer period of time. Now, I argued with him with data, because data says, and I'm a big data person because I'm an engineer, data says since we began commuting back in the 1900s, most people feel an hour is their limit. Anything over an hour still takes time away from their family and their day. But we could see this, and this is what we have to be careful about. So we call these unintended consequences. We also have to be careful as we make our urban core very much more desirable that our real estate prices don't go up and we take the underserved members of our community and shift them out further, which puts them away from food, away from healthcare, and away from jobs. So we have to be careful how we do this as a society. Parking, I talked about, you know, there's a lot of cities that are concerned they get a lot of revenue from parking, but the curb has a heck of a lot of value. Curb for deliveries, curb for people drop off and pick up. I'm a huge sports fan, hockey and college sports, but anyway, I'm a big Red Wings fan. And we opened a new arena, not this past year, but the year before. And of course I was excited to go. And being kind of a geek, I got my tickets and had my mobile boarding passes, I've been flying too much, my mobile tickets. And then I thought I'm going to be smart and get parking in advance, because you can reserve parking in advance. Sure, I got my parking, I got that on my phone too, I'm good to go. I'm driving, I get downtown, and about half mile before I get to the parking garage, it's completely bottlenecked. I'm thinking, well, this is not so smart. This is really kind of dumb. And as I inch my way closer, what was causing the backup? There was a shared parking drop-off right before my parking garage. Dumb. So we have to think about, you know, really, is it smart parking? Is it smart drop-off, and the value of the curb space now? They moved that to the back of the arena. Last time I was down there, now they have to go behind the arena and get out of the normal way that people come in to park. So just thinking about those things, again, technology is great, but think about things before you deploy it, and then do it. What I did like, it was a very limited area, so trial it, see if it works, fail fast, and change it. That's the way that you can move forward. Vehicle miles traveled, we don't know. There's pros and cons on both sides. We believe that with sharing, vehicle miles traveled should go down, consolidation of rides. We might see the opposite happen. If you're able to send an empty car, let's say, to go pick up your dry cleaning, to go pick up your groceries, it could make things worse in terms of vehicle miles traveled. So we're watching it closely. And we have to think about what will make people change their behavior to go to the left side. What will be the incentivization, and or in some municipalities we're seeing a stick methodology being applied. Europe is famous for that right now with congestion taxes, etc., for vehicles entering the urban core. I mentioned a lot about the implications for mass transit. I think we have to think about a lot of first mile, last mile solutions. We want people in mass transit. That is the way to move people most expeditiously from A to B. But getting them from their home to that depot or station is the most difficult part. And a lot of people simply can't afford that. So again, finding a way to do that cheaply. A number of companies are starting to work on that with B2B services to be able to enable people to do that first mile, last mile. Working for Nissan, I spent a lot of time I spent 5 years living in Japan. I also went to Brazil and Mexico on a regular basis. We had facilities there, R&D facilities. Part of the offer, the employment offer there, is transportation every day. Because if they don't provide bus service to and from the plant, you're not going to get people to work. That's just standard. It's part of the package. Amazon, what a mess this was. I don't know if you put in a bid or not, but holy cow. And it took them so long to figure it out. But here's their criteria. Proximity to population center, international airport, major highways and roads, access to mass transit at the site. This was one of the clear criteria they insisted upon. You need it. You know, even workers, you know, who are working, packaging the goods, these aren't the super high paying jobs. They need to have access to be able to get to and fro work that is reliable, which is also another issue with some of our systems in the US. This is the silver bullet here. $2.1 trillion is going to be available from vehicle data monetization. Nobody knows how. That's a number that somebody calculated. But this is what $2.1 trillion, and everybody wants a piece of it. So everybody is getting data. We have the auto OEMs, they know more about you than you even know. When you sign the terms and conditions, how many of you actually read it? This is another push that's going on right now to make those terms and conditions readable with just a few bullet points, so you don't have to scroll through 8 pages. I know I don't read it, and I know I'm signing away everything, especially when those ads and everything pop up on my computer because I've been shopping on Amazon. Yeah, they know everything about you. Auto suppliers, similarly, they provide a lot of almost black box systems to the OEMs today, so they're getting all kinds of data. Retailers and service chains, they want to advertise, you know, to people all the time. They want them shopping, they want them ordering food. And now I'm gone. Here we go. High-tech giants, service providers, mobility providers, everybody wants your data. Everybody wants to own the data and use the data. Nobody wants to guarantee that it's safe. We haven't figured that out yet. Who is going to be the cyber guru who's always looking for somebody who's trying to get a hold of that data? What we do know is definitely hackers will do things. We know that for sure. It's how quickly you can recover and manage that hack. We're seeing a lot of mobility as services. We see campus circulators. Campuses are a great place to do this work. Students are very open, and it's just a great playground to try these things. Also, senior living complexes, one of the biggest problems for seniors right now. Most of us who are getting to that age know that you will probably live another 10 years after you lose your license. And I don't know about you, but I want to still be doing things and seeing my family and going out to eat and shopping and all that stuff. We see employee shuttles, B2B I mentioned, and then of course the little, this is a little grocery delivery car called Neuro, and there's also little things, little bots by Starship Technologies. We'll also be seeing, I keep mentioning the air. I think drones are the only thing that's going to save us in the world of e-commerce. The future is automated, connected, electrified, and shared. Electrified cars love short distances in urban areas. That's why you're going to start seeing a lot more EVs come into that kind of space. This is the timeline. How am I doing on time? I'm okay? So today we see vehicles that have advanced driver avoidance systems. This is lane departure warning, around view monitor, all those things that require you to do something to prevent some kind of a collision or accident. In 2020, almost those systems are going to be deployed throughout the model line. All the automakers introduced them on their high-level vehicles. Now they're coming through the whole product portfolio. You're going to start seeing a lot more vehicles communicating. In 2025, commercial trucking. 2025, you're going to start seeing a lot more platooning and automation. Why? Today we have a 50,000 driver shortage in our commercial vehicle drayage firms, and they have between 100 to 120% turnover every year. So we have a lot of people out there that aren't trained very well to be drivers. And drayage companies don't make a lot of profit anyway. So when you add all of that in with the driver turnover, it really creates an unsustainable situation. So we have to do something, and e-commerce is not going away. So we'll start seeing more and more of that. We'll have more communication, and probably about 12% we'll see sharing about, we think. And then in 2030, you'll see a lot more of level 4, which is geo-fenced areas. Many cities are planning it today: Singapore, Paris, London, San Francisco, providing areas of only autonomous vehicles. And by that point, too, about 26% will be shared. So we'll start seeing that increase more and more. So I already mentioned up a lot about interaction with non-motorized traffic, so I'm not going to talk so much about here, but just think about how you can keep everyone safe on the roadways. Let's talk about electrification. Today, the total sales in the US is about 3.8%, and that includes hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and full electric vehicles. It's part of the reason why the EPA and NHTSA changed the Obama fuel standards. Those Obama fuel standards were based on a significant percentage of vehicle sales being electrified. Most automakers, if they aren't already, this year, FCA has been paying a fine for a few years, and you saw the 100 and something million they're paying to Tesla to buy their credits. Most automakers couldn't do it, and you can't make people buy what they don't want. And there's several reasons people aren't buying electric vehicles. One is cost, second is infrastructure, the charging infrastructure, and third is range anxiety. They just don't go far enough. People don't feel comfortable that it fits into their daily lives. Now, understand, most of us only drive between 40 and 100 miles a day, and all EVs on the marketplace can do that today. But it's a mindset, and you think, oh geez, I have to go to the cottage, that's a 4-hour drive, I can't do that. So the technology is improving greatly. So what do we see happening? Today we have mostly internal combustion engines. Gas is cheap. People aren't changing their behavior. Even a vehicle that offers a hybrid and an internal combustion engine at the same price, and there are a few of them, people still aren't buying the hybrid. In 2020, we're going to continue to see better internal combustion engines. It's not dead. People have been saying we've done all we can do in the gasoline engine. They're so wrong. Every year more things come out. Cylinder deactivation, stop-start technology, transmissions that provide better fuel economy. It's still being worked on. Now, are the dollars being invested the same as what they used to be? No. And in the future, a powertrain will be a commodity. Back in my era, we wanted the power, we wanted the horsepower. It was very important to us. Today, no. 25% of people don't even test drive a vehicle before they buy it. That's a fact. They do make sure Google Play or Apple CarPlay is there. So it's a whole new customer experience. By 2025, there will be more battery electric vehicle growth. And I should have mentioned, last year we did increase the number of vehicle sales from 3.3 to 3.8%, all Tesla, over 2,000% increase. And it was only in Tesla. The other manufacturers, flat to negative. We will see fuel cell also. Fuel cell technology is really being worked on by the Japanese. Why? Because their electrical grid can't withstand all electrification, can't do it. After the Fukushima disaster, they closed all the nuclear power plants. If you want to go to a company that really understands, or go to a country that really understands energy conservation, go there. We could never, in the summertime, despite it being 95 and 100% humidity, the conference rooms in the office never went below 80 to 85. So it's called cool biz, you dress appropriately. And in 2030, we still see the internal combustion engine is going to be very predominant. Now that could change if we get a lot more infrastructure, depending on battery technology, but we still see about 70%. But we will see battery electric vehicles coming down and actually reaching almost cost parity by that point with some of the improvements that we're seeing, and especially if we have a breakthrough in solid state batteries. Most people are saying that's at least 10 years away right now. This is our charging infrastructure today. We have 47,000 about charging outlets, including 6,250 DC fast chargers. DC fast charger can charge a vehicle in 20 to 30 minutes. Very reasonable, about the same amount of time that you spend when you stop at a gas station, fill up, and buy a snack. In 2030, if indeed we see the growth we expect, we are going to need from 6,250 to 27,500 DC fast chargers and up to 601,000 level 2 or what you have in your home outlets or what you have on the street. That is a huge increase from what we have today. And that's based on 15 million EVs with 88% charging at home. Actually, it's about 95% today that charge at home or their workplace. So the actual usage of the chargers out in the general public isn't as large as we think. And I mentioned about the driving patterns and really how an electric vehicle can fit in your everyday life. And a lot of communities are starting to have EV ride and drive days so that people can really understand how it can fit into their lives. And I'm not going to go through this. You can't even see it. It's an eye chart. We're engineers. We love to put a lot of crap on the page. But you know, it talks about how advanced driver avoidance systems have proliferated, and then by 2020, they'll be standard throughout the marketplace. Vehicle automation. We will see geofenced vehicles, as I mentioned, in 2020. By 2040, you'll begin to see autonomous vehicles going anywhere on their own. Connectivity will be prolific in all vehicles in the 2020s, and new mobility services, they're not going to go anywhere because, again, we need to provide that menu of services to be able to integrate seamlessly. So I really thank you for your attention. Our center does all kinds of research. We host a variety of events. We provide connection for municipalities to get together and talk about the various things that they're trying, the various problems. Please reach out to myself. Bernard's in the back. He runs our Automotive Communities Partnership Program. And we'd love to talk with you further anytime. Don't hesitate. Thank you.